everyone, it's Alice, and today I thought we would have a little chat about one of my favorite types of books, which is cozy mysteries. Now, I think cozy mysteries can mean different things to different people, but I think the general idea of it is that they're mysteries without too many gory details. There's not like excessive violence in them. I mean, people get murdered in a lot of these books, and so there's that, but it's either like kind of off stage or it just isn't described in like a horrific way, I guess. And then usually there aren't like a lot of spicy scenes and stuff like that, and they're generally just a little bit lighter, I guess, and cozier, obviously. Now, I really like these kinds of books. I like that mysteries can have sort of like a comedic twist to them. Like, there's something about that that really works for me that I often find in cozy mysteries, and I really enjoy it. And I like sometimes reading mysteries that are intriguing but not too dark. I love a dark book, like sometimes really dark, but every once in a while I just want something lighter, something fun, but something intriguing and mysterious, but also cozy. Now, when I use the word lighter, it doesn't necessarily mean less substance, although sometimes it can mean that too, but there is a range within it, I feel. But yeah, that's how I define cozy mysteries. And then there's like usually often added elements of like a small town setting or like a small village vibe. There's like amateur sleuths and nosy neighbors. Like, those kinds of things are quite common in cozy mysteries, and I love all of it. I do have a couple that have detectives in them as well though, and I love them all. Let's get into my favorites though. To no surprise to anyone, I'm of course gonna have to start with this, The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman, which is set in a small retirement village in England where we follow 4 pensioners who gather weekly to discuss unsolved crimes. And they all have different histories and different backgrounds, but they're all friends. And then a brutal killing takes place in their village, and they decide to just sort of... I mean, they basically insert themselves into the investigation completely uninvited because they're curious and nosy, and, you know, why not? These books are just super enjoyable, and one of my favorite things in these books are the characters. I love just how they're elderly and they don't give a fluff anymore about any consequences to any of their actions because they're old and they're kind of in the mindset of like, what are you gonna do to me? And I just think it's a lot of fun. And I also really like the different dynamics within the friend group. And I like how throughout the series we get to learn more about their different backgrounds. I also feel like the mysteries are always very solid. They're always intriguing. And of course there are things in the series that are convenient, like the characters do get away with like a lot. But it's just fun, you know? It's super entertaining, and they're just books filled with mischievous old people running around solving mysteries. Secondly, we have Cocaine Blues by Kerry Greenwood, which is the first book in the Phryne Fisher series. This is historical fiction. It's set in the 1920s, I think towards like the mid to late 1920s in this book. And we follow Phryne as she moves from England to Melbourne and decides she's gonna become a lady detective. The historical setting of this is excellent, and I love the 1920s vibe, but the best part of this book is definitely the main character. She is a boss lady, she's unapologetically intelligent, she loves adventure and men, and she's just a lot of fun, and she's really cool, and she knows it, and you just can't help but fall in love with her because she's amazing. The books in the series are also quite fast-paced, and they're super enjoyable, and they're very quick to read. Like, almost all of the books are around 200 pages, so they're the kinds of books that you can just fly through. And I always enjoy reading about Phryne and what she gets up to, because she gets up to a lot. Then, of course, I have to just mention the Poirot series by Agatha Christie, which starts off with this. This is The Mysterious Affair at Styles, and the series goes on for 40-something books, I think. And of course, in these books, we follow the famous Belgian detective Poirot, who is the best at solving all the mysteries. I'm not gonna go on and on about this because obviously this is a very well-known series, but I've loved reading the Poirot novels since I was quite young, and I just think that these books are a lot of fun. It is quite a long series, and there are definitely some books that are better than others, but I always feel like the mysteries are intriguing, and Poirot is always just such a fun character to read about. If you've never read the series, starting with the first book might be a good idea, but I feel like after that you can kind of jump around a little bit and it doesn't really matter. I feel like I've accidentally jumped around and it was fine. I also just want to mention the Miss Marple series, also by Agatha Christie, which starts off with the murder at the Vicarage. Although I think that Miss Marple appeared in some short stories before the novels began, but this is the first full-length novel, I'm pretty sure. And this just follows Miss Marple, who is a nosy neighbor in her small town, and she keeps like getting involved in these investigations and helping the police because she's really smart. Now, a thing I just want to mention about this series is that I remember when I started reading this, I was surprised by how Miss Marple was in the first books, because she sort of changes throughout the series and she becomes the Miss Marple that most of us sort of know. And in the first books, she's kind of like mean and rude, but it does get better. And either way, the mysteries are always intriguing and she's an interesting character, and she's just very intelligent and good at figuring things out. Moving on, we have A Meditation on Murder by Robert Thorogood, which is the first book in the Death in Paradise series, which is set on a fictional island in the Caribbean. And we follow this detective who is very British, and he's always very hot and bothered, and he kind of hates everything and everyone. And we follow him and his considerably happier team, and they work together. They solve mysteries, obviously, because he's in the police. And in this first book, we have like a locked room mystery where the leader of a spiritual retreat has been murdered in this locked room with 5 other people. And the case appears to be pretty obvious, but then, of course, it's not. This is easy, enjoyable, entertaining, and just a lot of fun. And I think that following our main character is just so funny because he's such a contrast to his environment, and everyone around him is like relaxed and easygoing, and then we have him running around, which is just super funny. I also think that the mysteries in these books are always intriguing, and they're perfect like summary cozy mysteries, and they're just pure fun. While on the topic of Robert Thorogood though, I will also mention that he has another book called The Marlow Murder Club, which is also a cozy mystery. It's set in England, if I remember correctly, and we follow this elderly lady. She's like 77 or something, and she's out swimming one night and she witnesses a brutal murder. And when the police doesn't believe her because they can't find any evidence of this murder, she decides to investigate herself. It's kind of like similar to the Thursday Murder Club, so if you like that book, you would probably enjoy this one. Next, we have Crocodile on the Sandbank by Elizabeth Peters, which is the first book in the Amelia Peabody series. In here, we of course follow Amelia Peabody, who is a feminist Victorian lady. She's no nonsense, she's clever, and she takes the world of archaeology by storm by being really smart and also, shockingly, wearing men's trousers because, my gosh, there is nothing worse than a woman in pants. This one takes us to Egypt, and like the whole series starts with us meeting Amelia, and she has come into an inheritance, and she decides to use that inheritance to travel the world because that's what she wants to do, which is not common at the time for a woman, obviously. And on the way to Egypt, she meets this other woman, and they become friends and companions, and they go to Egypt together. And there is like a mystery, there's a mummy running around, there's a smidge of romance, but it's also like a cozy mystery slash a delightful adventure, and it's just a lot of fun. Then we have this beautiful book. This is The Widows of Malabar Hill by Sujata Massey. This series is set in the 1920s in Bombay, And our main character, Perveen Mystery, is Bombay's first female lawyer, and she becomes that after joining her father's law firm. And the whole series is about her investigating cases that other people can't or won't investigate. Like in this one, she investigates this case where some of the witnesses to a murder, they are living in seclusion and they're not allowed to talk to men outside their family, but they can talk to other women. And so Perveen Mystery goes and talks to them and gets involved in the investigation and helps out and kind of solves it. In this first book, we also delve a little bit into our main character's background. She has had like a situation in her life which has really affected her, and we look a little bit into that, which is kind of horrifying but also very interesting, and it sort of explains why she is where she is in her life, which I think is really interesting. I also love the historical setting of this, like 1920s Bombay in this just comes to life and it's amazing. And I feel like I always learn something from these books that I didn't know before, and it's really well baked into the story, so you don't necessarily notice, which is just fantastic. Next, I have a book that I read quite recently. It is A Chapter and Curse by Elizabeth Penney. And in this one, we follow a librarian who moves from Vermont to Cambridge, England to take over the family's like crumbling bookshop. And pretty soon after they get there, they hold this poetry reading. And during the poetry reading, someone is murdered with the main character's aunt's knitting needles. Out of all of the books that I've mentioned today, this might be the one that's the most like traditional cozy mystery or like conventional. It's very, very light. It's just a book with like fun, quirky characters. It has a lovely setting and an intriguing mystery. And that's kind of it. Like, it doesn't really delve deep into anything. And sometimes that's what you want. Sometimes you just want something very light that you don't need to think about when you're reading it. And that's what this is. It's also very, very British, and it has like a little bit of romance in it as well, if you're into that. Second to last, before we move on to the TBR, we have The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie by Alan Bradley. This is set in 1950s England, and we follow an 11-year-old girl who is like an aspiring chemist, and she loves poisons, and she's very smart and curious. And when she finds a dying man in her garden one morning, I think it is, and the man passes away before her eyes, the police come to investigate this, and because she's so curious, she decides to investigate herself because she found him, and why wouldn't she? This one is quite unique in the way that it's told. It has a very specific tone to it, which took me a little bit of time to get used to, but once I was into it, I really, really enjoyed it. The main character of this is definitely the star of the show in here, and getting to know her and being inside her head is really interesting, and following her throughout the events of the book, like, it's just a delight. And she's a character that you won't forget about easily. Like, she's quite the 11-year-old girl. Lastly, we have The Mitford Murders by Jessica Fellows, which is again set in the 1920s, but it's set in England, and we follow this character who wants to escape her life living with her horrible uncle. And the way that she gets away is that she starts working for this family in the countryside, and she gets, like, her job is basically helping the 5 sisters of the family with everything that they need. And of course there is a murder in this. There is a murder on a train, and our main character and one of the sisters are there, and so they get like entangled in the crime. I've really enjoyed the books that I've read in the series. I love the historical time period and the setting, and I really enjoyed following our main character as she sort of progresses throughout the series and everything that happens to her, and I've just really enjoyed them. I have said this before though, and I'm gonna say it again. If you go into these books thinking it's about the Mitford family, that's not what these books are. You have to completely disregard the fact that they're called the Mitfords. Like, they could have easily been called something else and it wouldn't have mattered at all. I know that a lot of people have gone into the series thinking and wanting like something about the Mitfords, and it literally doesn't matter. So you have to completely look away from that, and if you can do that, these are really solid cozy mysteries. If you can't, you're probably gonna be disappointed by them because they're just cozy mysteries and it's not really about that family at all. Alright, then we have a little TBR that I thought I would just quickly show you because I have some cozy mysteries waiting for me on my shelves. The first one is one I'm really excited about. It's Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. And just the title of this immediately gives off a vibe that I really like. This follows a 60-year-old woman who is a self-proclaimed tea expert, and then she's also kind of like a matchmaker, and it seems like she's doing some amateur sleuthing in her free time. And then one day she wakes up to find a dead man in her tea shop, and she decides she's gonna investigate the crime. It just sounds like a lot of fun, and it sounds like this woman is kind of like nosy, and there's something about slightly older like main characters in cozy mysteries that I just absolutely love. I think it's the fact that when you reach a certain age, you just stop caring about a lot of things, and it just makes it a lot of fun to read about. Secondly, we have Death by Dumpling by Vivien Chen, which I've had for a while now. I've mentioned it several times and I really just need to read it. It follows this woman who has a horrible breakup, and after that she decides to return to her family, and she starts working in the family restaurant, and like I think her mom keeps trying to like find her a husband, and it's a whole thing. Then the property manager of this restaurant turns up dead after having had takeaway from the restaurant, which obviously is a little bit suspicious. And I think that the case in here is about the main character having to like to solve the mystery because the police suspect them. So they have to find out who actually did it to sort of clear themselves. A slightly similar one to that I have is Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Manansala. And I don't know what it is. I think there's something about like cozy mysteries in combination with food that really appeals to me. Like there's something about it that just, I think it just really works. This one also has a dog on the cover, which it gets bonus points for. The main character in this one also moves back home with her family after a horrible breakup, and in this one she has a bunch of aunties trying to set her up with like a husband or something. So it's kind of like a similar situation, but I think the mystery in here is that a food critic dies after having eaten at the restaurant, and the food critic is the ex-boyfriend, which sounds like quite the situation and like something that they need to figure out. Lastly, we have The Bangalore Detectives Club by Harini Nagendra, and this is set in 1920s Bangalore, which sounds amazing, and we follow this clever, headstrong woman who has sort of resigned herself to a quiet life after getting married, but then she's at a party one night and she's in the garden just getting some time to herself, and she sees this mysterious stranger in the bushes or something, and then half an hour later someone turns up dead at the party. And I think what happens is that the police suspect the wrong person, and our main character realizes that it's the wrong person and decides to investigate to help this person out, and it sounds amazing. I think the setting of this in particular is going to be fantastic, and I love reading about books set in the 1920s. That was the last book though, so now I'd love to hear if any of you have any cozy mystery recommendations, because I'm always looking for more, and even though I have like several on my shelves and I'm also like in the middle of a gazillion series, I just can't get enough of them. So if you have any recommendations, let me know. I'd also love to know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned and what you thought, or if you have any exciting cozy mysteries on your TBR. All of that good stuff, tell me all about it. As always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!